almost Mother's Day 2020, and usually the kids get up, make us some French toast. Hubby brings you some orange juice and fresh coffee, and that's the payola for all the meals we fix during the year. However, around here, we go for something a little meatier. We're going to be showing you how to have hubby and the kids custom grind, some nice hamburger just for you. It's going to be made from a beautiful pork shoulder, a lovely chuck roast, and roasted garlic, sauteed onions and mushrooms and parsley right into the meat. Freeze it, save it, and you've got meals to come. We're going to start off by roasting some garlic. The reason we want to roast it off first is it gives it a really delectable, sweet, and wonderful flavor. I've got a garlic roasting pan here that we're going to use. However, if you want to just wrap it up in some foil and put it onto a baking pan or something, that'll be fine. I love these terracotta ones. It really keeps that flavor in and gives it a nice feel. You can get these just about anywhere. They're terracotta on the outside and then they're glazed on the inside. So we're going to start with an entire head of garlic. You don't need to take off any of the outside paper or anything. You just need to open up the head a little bit by letting this breathe. We want to be able to get our seasonings inside. Now this one's sitting kind of cattywampus, so I'm going to give it a little cut here so I can get it to sit up a little straighter. We've got this cut off so that we can just see the cloves individually. You don't have to take them out or anything. We're going to cover this, all of it, in a little bit of olive oil. I want to take a little bit of kosher salt or sea salt and place that here, and I put a little bit of pepper on it. I use a lot of pepper, freshly ground pepper. I think it brings a nice palate to just about everything that we make that's savory. We're going to cover this. We're going to put it in a 450-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. And while that's roasting off, we can get started on preparing our vegetables and then the meat grind. The next thing we're going to incorporate into our meat is the flavor. We're going to use, now we're doing a small batch today. You can scale this to however you want, but we're using a fresh white onion. You can use yellow onion as well, 10-15s, the sweet onions. Typically the reds are not what I put in here, or you can use scallions if you like. We're going to use some baby bella mushrooms, and we're going to cut these up and put it into a saute pan on medium-low with some olive oil and a little bit of butter. We're going to let those cook off while our garlic is roasting, and we're going to start cutting up some meat for the grind. So we don't really care about how this is cut, because it's all going to get sauteed and ground down to begin with. Now we're going to take off this outer peel, of course. If you cut this way, like from root end to root end, the onion will maintain its shape a little bit more than if you cut it this way. We don't want whole pieces of onion. We want just the flavor. So we're going to go with the grain on this, and we're just going to cut this like this. Just a nice rough, I've got one flying all over the place. Just a nice rough chop, and be able to just put it in that saute pan, because again, this is for flavor. We don't really particularly need it to look like onions in there. Most of the time, people don't even realize there's onions in this meat because we're going to saute it down. So to our chopped onions, we're going to add some mushrooms, and we're going to chop these up as well for the saute. You can use about any type of mushroom that you like. These are baby bellas. They're easy to find. They have a really delicious flavor. You could use porcinis, you could use white buttons, you could use whatever you'd like. However, I do like the darker mushrooms. And we've rinsed these, and we're gonna just remove these little stems. Now you could do this in a food processor if you want, but there's really not very much of it, so we're just going for a rough chop anyway. They're going to cook down as they continue in our saute pan. So we're going to put all of our little caps over there and just go through these and get a nice cut and just rough chop everything. Again, it's going to be sauteed, and it's going to cut down a little bit. Okay, and we want those stems. Normally we'd throw those stems away or save them and use them for stock, but today we're actually going to use these. These mushrooms will give a real meaty, savory flavor to your ground meat. Now this ground meat can be used any way that you use a normal ground hamburger, which has a lot of preservatives and all kinds of chemicals and a lot of salt sometimes. You can use it in meatloaves, you can make hamburgers, you can use it in anything at all that you would want to use that. So I'm going to cut the rest of these up. Again, just big pieces. And then we're going to throw this and our onion in a saute pan on medium low with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then we're going to let those kind of simmer off, saute off, and we're not going to touch them. We're just going to let them go. Remember, our garlic is in the oven right now, roasting off. Now mix these up, add a little bit of salt and pepper. Remember, salt as you go, season as you go, and you won't have to season so much at the end. This is where we impart the flavor. So I'm going to add these to a saute pan on medium low with extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of butter. I'm going to cover it and let those saute. Now the next part of our ground meat is to give it that back-end bacony flavor. Every dish will benefit, whether you're making a hamburger or whatever, and you don't even have to add bacon to it. It's already in the meat. So we've got here some Applewood smoked bacon. We're going to cut it into just some little slices, and we're going to throw this in a food processor. I saw this idea actually on America's Test Kitchen, I think it was. I love that show. And it made it into kind of a puree, which then very nicely melded into the meat. If you make it chopped, then you get little stringy pieces here and there, and it just wasn't as good. So I've incorporated this into our recipe. So we're just going to separate it out a little bit. We don't want these big hunks. And I've used about, this is 5 thin slices. You could use peppered bacon, you could use thicker slices, you could add more if you wanted to. The pork roast that we have is a shoulder, so it does have some fats in it, but we couldn't get hold of a really heavily marbled beef, so this will help a little bit with the fat. I'm going to put this in the food processor, and we're going to just get this to where it's almost to like a pate. And you definitely want to pulse it because it'll ball up pretty quick. Now we're not going to cook this off. This is going to go into the meat mixture itself. Okay, so now you can see that it is no longer balled up, that we've broken it down pretty well, and it is now almost like a puree. So we'll take this out, and we're going to save it in the refrigerator for a little bit while we cut up our meats. We want those meats to be, before we grind them, to be almost a little bit frozen. They'll stay in and go through that food, not the food processor, but the meat grinder on our KitchenAid a little bit easier. So we're going to put this in the refrigerator so it stays cold as well. The next thing we're going to do is start to cut up our meats. We've taken our pork and our beef out of the freezer, and it's just slightly firm. It definitely isn't frozen. And we're going to make some big chops in it because we need to get it through the part of our food processor or the KitchenAid meat grinder, and that hole's only about maybe, I think, 1 inch in diameter. We're going to alternate the pork and the beef and our other ingredients, the vegetables, and our seasonings as we go. So we're just going to get a nice big chop on these. And as we do this, we're going to add it to our pan. Now you may think, why can't I just buy ground meat? Well, of course you can. However, if you do this, number one, it's really economical, and you get to choose what kind of meats are in the food you're feeding you and your family. The other thing is if you do this maybe once a month with couple of pounds, you've got ground meat that's quality in your freezer for quite some time. We find that if we just package it in 1 pound flattened patties, mark it, of course, before we put it in there, and then wrap all of those and then put it into the freezer. That we have plenty of ground beef, actually beef and pork, for the entire month or more. We use ground beef a lot, maybe stuffed bell peppers, hamburgers, of course, our very favorite, grilled or in the oven or sauteed. And we like to make stuff like lasagnas and other Italian foods. So I'm going to finish cutting up this beef and this pork, and we're going to go with sizes about a 1.5-inch cube. And once those are all cut up, then we're going to get everything else together to start grinding. And it'll only take a few minutes. We have our vegetables, our onions and our mushrooms nicely browned off. And if you can see this, it's brown and luscious, but most of the liquid from the olive oil and the butter has incorporated now into these. We're going to let this cool. We don't want to put it in hot because it'll kind of cook some of the meat as it goes through. On the other hand, we have our garlic. You can see he came out of the oven. It's nice and toasted. And as he cools, don't try it when it's hot, but when he cools, we're just going to smash this and get the garlic out of there. Adding that garlic to here, then we're going to season it. Because we didn't use a lot of salt and pepper or parsley here, this is going to carry our seasoning into our meat. So we are going to add a little bit of dried parsley. Now you can use fresh parsley. I find that dried kind of works a little bit better. We dried this ourselves in our dehydrator, and if you want to know how to do that, our friend Cindy Big Horse at Indian Preservation, you can see this down in our comments. The link to her YouTube channel will teach you all about dehydration. But we're going to add, I do like a little bit of parsley. It adds a little wake up to your food, and it looks really pretty in there. But I'm going to add it to this while this is a little bit warm. This will, once I've coated that dried parsley, it kind of wakes up just a little bit, but yet it's going to maintain its structure inside the meat itself. So we're going to let these things cool down. Our cut meats are in a metal bowl that's in the refrigerator, and our bacon puree is also in the refrigerator. Remember, cold meat's going to go through that meat grinder a little bit easier. We've taken our garlic, onions, and mushrooms that have been sauteed and put them in a glass container. We're going to put this in the refrigerator, but I wanted to show you very quickly about getting this garlic out. You don't have to worry about trying to peel it. Just take a good solid surface. You can take, I just use the end of my knife and get it, and you can see that that garlic just comes right out. Now this is still a little warm. I mean, it's not like freezing, but it's still a little warm. We're going to take out as much as we can, just a simple little press. And you can do this with the back of a plate if you wanted to, whatever you feel comfortable doing. Scrape out any of the pieces that come out. And this is almost as sweet and nutty as you wouldn't believe. Roasted garlic is one of the treasures of cooking for sure. I'm just going to get rid of these little pieces of the paper. Now, you know we like to keep things back and make stock. So everything that we've cut so far, the onion skins and any fat I may have trimmed off of the meat that I didn't want, and this roasted garlic are all going to be saved, and we're going to make a nice garlic-based stock for us to use later. And we can use it to make gravies, sauces, whatever we want. And again, you don't have to cut this garlic because it's going to go through the grinder. But I'm going to add it to our mushrooms. And I'm going to mix this together so that as this comes through, we get a little bit of mushroom, we get a little bit of onion, we get a little bit of garlic, and it's consistent through our meat. So we're going to mix this. And we're going to add this to the refrigerator. Then we're going to get out everything once it's really nice and chilled, start grinding, and it's done. Everything is chilled. We have our cubed meat that is now chilled in this. I find that the metal bowls really keep this nice and chilly. Trimmed in about 1 and 1.5 cubes. We have inch cubes, and then we have our bacon that's been pureed. And we have our seasoning. This is the mushrooms, the onions, the roasted garlic, and a little bit of parsley. To this, before we get started, we're going to add a little bit of salt. This is finely ground sea salt. I like that flavor in there. And of course, a little bit of pepper. Now, you could spice anything up you want to here. You could add in some red pepper flakes if you like. You could add in, if you're not a salt fan, you could add in something like Mrs. Dash or Everglades or Emeralds or whatever you like, whatever flavor combination you like. These just happen to be our favorites. So before we begin to put everything together, let me move this guy. We're going to look at our KitchenAid. Now, this is the KitchenAid 600, but all the KitchenAids can do this. You just have to make sure you let it not overheat while you're accomplishing it. To put this on, we're going to take this little screw out of the side. Let's do this. Just lift this and take this little screw out of the side. And this is the meat hopper and the grinder end of the attachment. We want to make sure that we put our blades in here. And they're going to go, now those are pretty sharp, so be careful when you handle it. And then you have two options. You have a coarse grind and you have a fine grind. For us, we do a coarse grind for this, but a fine grind if we're making sausage. That's another event. So we're going to place this on here, and it has two little ears that fit into those tabs. And then just simply screw this on and make sure it's on fairly tight. Place this in here, you'll feel it snug up and make sure it's all the way in. And then we're going to tighten that as tight as we can get it. I'm going to take this and put this over here. Now, when this meat comes out, I've found that it does have a little bit of a distance. So you don't want it splattering over here. So I use a large collection bowl like this because that meat's going to come out here. So this is in here fairly tight. We have this little presser that allows you to push in here and to keep the meat flowing while there's some here in the hopper. We're going to grab a little bit of meat, making sure we do pork, beef, a little bit of bacon, a little bit of this, so that it grinds fairly well. Once we have it in here, we're going to mix it a little bit more. In order to do this, I'm going to wear some gloves. Not because my hands aren't clean, because they certainly are. It just is a little tighter, because you're going to be handling a lot of slippery things. You don't want your hands to get where you can't use them. Now, this is kind of the fun part. Your kids can do this. There's nothing sharp that they can do. You cannot stick your hand. The blades are here, so you could stick your finger in there, and it's fun for them. Involve your children in cooking, and no matter what their age, so that they learn how to cook for themselves and not eat fast food all the time. While we're doing this, we're going to put this, and you'll see this is going around. It's on. We're going to put this to begin with at about 4. So we're going to grab some meat, and it'll feed it down. We're going to grab a little bit of bacon and a little bit of our mixture. And as you see, it's going to start to come out. We'll take this and simply press down on it. You don't want to press hard, but you do want to press so that that all gets through. So I'm going to finish grinding all this meat and all of our little yummies, and then I'll show you how we package it. End of our meat now, and we're just going to press this down. Now, you can press pretty hard on this, and once you get to here, you can see that this is just at the very ends. We're going to turn it up to its highest speed and get that last bit out of here. Now, you can touch right here. The blade is underneath that die that is cutting the meat through. Okay, so that's about it. And as you can see, let's move over here. As you can see, we have really nicely ground meat. It is pork, it is roasted garlic, sauteed onions and mushrooms, parsley, salt and pepper, and some wonderful beef. We're going to plat this off into 1-pound patties, flatten them out so they freeze well, and then package them in 5 pounds per 1 big gallon baggie. And we'll label those baggies, put them in the freezer, and we'll have wonderful ground beef and pork for anything we want. Now, we could have gone through half of this and flavored the other half with something else or had nothing. This also works really well if you switch out the die to the smaller for making your own breakfast sausage. Pork shoulder really works well, and it's one of my favorite ones to get. It's richly marbled, which is unusual for most of the pork. It has some nice taste and flavor to it. You can put that in there with a little bit of sage, some thyme, a little bit of garlic, however you like your sausage, maybe even a little bit of maple syrup, and make great sausage. That is another show. But we're going to package this off. I'll show you what it looks like, and then you can have hubby and the kids make you a Mother's Day. So we're going to take our mixture, and if you want, this is a good time to just go through, make sure it's all mixed nice. And we're going to package this. I package it in 1 pound. I find that to be an easy if I'm going to feed 2 or 3 people. And you can always get another one. So I'm just going to take a freezer baggie. Now we're going to wipe this baggie off, of course, before we get through. I'm going to place this on here. And I found that starting with about a handful is probably going to be pretty close. And we're going to flatten these out before we put them in the freezer so they'll store better and freeze more equally. And that is a half a pound. So I'm going to put in another one. And we are at 1 pound, 1 ounce. I'll take it. So we're going to place these here, and we'll finish doing all the rest of these. We'll label them on our date and what's in it, and then we're going to place them in a large baggie, 5 pounds at a time, and that way we know we have 5 pounds in here in 1 pound increments. So I'll show you what they look like finished, and we'll be back in a minute. We've got everything packaged now, and we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds of ground beef ready to go. And I continue to say ground beef, but it is ground beef and pork. That's already seasoned, has no preservatives, and is in 1 pound packages. We're just going to smash these so that they're about equal. Now, you can use a rolling pin if you want to. I just make sure all of the air is out. This would be a great thing if you have one of those nifty food savers that you could also do it here as well. I'm going to just, I do it almost to the end. Just take my hand, smash it where it's flat. Don't smash it out because we want to keep those things cool and keep them clean, not cool. I don't know why I said that. And then like this. Now you could have written on the bag before you started, which sometimes is nice, but I never am sure quite how many bags I'm going to use. So I just wait until I'm almost done. And then I'll just write on them. Now we are using a freezer baggie, and it's important that you're not using like a sandwich bag. Generally, if you don't know, like if you pull all of your baggies out and you don't know if it's a freezer bag or not, if it says date and contents and it's thicker, it's usually a freezer bag. So we're going to get all of these done. Imagine all of this yummy sitting right there in your freezer, ready to go. And ready to package up, cook anything you want that has yummies. From Italian dishes to hamburgers to SOS. Those of you who know what SOS are, hello to all of our other military friends. We will be making that on a show. We're also going to do some nice hamburgers, show you how to grill those. And we're going to do some loose meat sandwiches for those Yankees up there that like that. People down here in Texas never heard of such a thing. Now we're going to label these each with our date and what's in this, and label this with all 6 pounds. Once that goes in the freezer, we can pull it out for anything that we want to. Great project for the kids. You'll hear a lot of ews. It's great for them. Let them do that. Hubby will feel great running that through the meat grinder. And it's all for Mother's Day. Then make them do a nice grill. Grill you a nice hamburger. Sit back with a little bit of sangria or maybe a margarita and enjoy your Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there from everyone at Jillian Lambert Photo and Home Cooking Kitchen.